Hey Donna, how are you?
Hey, Celia, I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. Where are you today?
I'm at home. I'm in San Luis Obispo, California, in my beautiful home.
That's right, with your beautiful panel walls there.
Yeah.
We were just joking before we started recording about how awesome it is that she has those walls. Now she has a perfect video backdrop for all the big interviews she's going to have coming up. So today, Donna and I are just hanging out. We're wanting to just see where the conversation goes, hopefully unearthing some interesting twists and turns for ourselves to have our own awakenings and our own enlightenment. But for those who are going to watch this or listen in later, hopefully we can bring up some interesting stories and share some of our truths. That can also activate, empower, inspire, and hopefully maybe even do a little bit of healing for you. So we'll just see where the conversation goes and just relax into it. And before we get going, because I'm sure not everybody listening is familiar with who you are, I'd love to do a little bit of a bio here. It says Donna Helete is a regenerative grief coach. She's a relationship tender, mentor, and community builder with an experience in nonprofit leadership. She walks the path towards elderhood, bringing with her real life credentials, which include the death of her husband of 28 years in September 2015. Through her experience, she learned there is a regenerative nature to grief. Ooh, I want to dive into that, which allows our spirits to be reborn again and again. Amen.
Yeah.
She is honored to pay forward the support and wisdom she received along the way and guide others to gain access to the full vibrancy of their gifts in life. She provides one-on-one coaching and can be at your support whenever you need her. You just need to go find her online at donnahelete.com. And Donna and I are dear friends, and I'm so excited to be with you. And I'm loving just looking at your bio here and seeing how you, in just a short amount of years, you had obviously this whole life before your husband's death, but since going through that, you have yourself gone through this process that you're talking about in your grief process, and then you have been reborn and you have been alive here on the planet, transitioning into a new version of yourself, and then through that experience finding so much meaning in your own experience that now you're able to help other people who are in all of the various parts of that journey. Can you share a little bit about where the genesis of this or the background, like the before and where you're at now?
Oh, wow.
That's all. That's all.
Well, what I remember is that when my husband was diagnosed in 2013 with stage 4 prostate cancer, and when I started to share that with friends, which was very soon after the diagnosis because I needed support, I remember people saying to me, Donna, everything you've done in your life has led you up to this point to be fully supported for what's happening. And it's true. It really surprised me. I mean, I actually did grief rituals before that with a woman named Saban Fusome, who was one of my mentors. And most people haven't, Western folks that I know of haven't really attended many grief rituals. So that plus the community building that I had done through my work with different educational organizations and, kind of a village mentality of coming together and learning to be with one another and kind of remember what that's like. Those things made all the difference in the world in terms of this journey. So he was ill for 2 years. Just over 2 years. I think it was, I can't remember the number of days. I calculated one time. Not that many. We got to be with him to actually physically witness his spirit leaving his body. And, when you have an experience of seeing somebody, he transformed and healed so much. He wasn't cured, but he healed. And to get to witness that experience and see what that brings out, in him, but also in me, to have all those energies moving through me, it was remarkable. And it was nothing that I'd ever heard about. I don't hear people talking about that. So I kept saying, looking around going, is it okay to feel joy? I mean, at that point, he was just a month or two from dying. Like, nobody talks about that, you know? And then so I got concerned at some levels, you know, of like, wow, how would people judge me if I said that, you know, we find some joy in this process. Not that you were at all, you know, grateful for the death itself, but the lessons from it, the learning, the experience of it, you know, can be completely transformative if you allow it.
So it sounds like part of what you're saying is that even though this very heavy thing was happening, and at a certain point you understood where it was going, you still were able to show up, be present in the moment, have really meaningful experiences, as well as transformation, as well as healing, in a time that for many people, they probably would be relatively unconscious, right? They would probably choose to be like checked out, and or just hit over the head with all the emotions that a crisis like this brings into your life, that they wouldn't be able to access those deeper roots and understanding what they need to support them. And like you said, it sounds like you had already been on that path, not necessarily knowing that this is where you're going to end up, at least at this stage in your journey. But I'd love for you to tell more about your background, even as far back to your upbringing, because as long as I've known you, you know, I know you in the context of several different communities, but all the people I know from those communities, I love and cherish so much. And it seems like there's this common thread around, you know, love and reverence for the earth, and for our planet, and really acknowledgement of, you know, ancient ways and traditions and rhythms and seasons, and sort of the stuff that in our modern American society, we, first of all, are never taught. Second of all, have been taught that is all weird, or somehow different, or somehow bad or wrong, or anti what we've been taught. So if we're following or interested or being pulled or drawn in those directions, you know, there's so much stigma. And then there's beautiful communities that it seems like from like day one, they're just like, and this is how it is, and we're fine, and it's all good. And then, you know, when you're in those worlds, you start to realize like, wow, there's all these people living their lives in a different way than I am. And I'm realizing now that I have a choice, right? That I can choose how to show up in my life. And so I'm curious to, like, where did those roots get planted? Is that something that were principles from your actual upbringing with your family of origin, or is that something you found later in life?
You know, my family of origin, you know, we were a fairly close family of five. I was a middle child, only girl, two brothers, and my mom and dad still married. You know, very white picket fence background. They still live in the same home as, you know, since I was 5.
What part of the world?
In San Jose, California. Okay. So, you know, we're talking some roots there. There's some stability there. And I would say that, you know, bottom line from my childhood, I grew up always knowing that I was loved. I literally can't think of any time in my life that I wondered if my parents loved me. And I honestly can't think of a greater gift for a parent to give a child. And I pray that I've given that to mine because I've watched other people who didn't have that sense. And wow, you know, our whole lives can be about finding that and recreating that, you know. So absolutely. I feel super blessed that I've got that.
I just want to pause for a second, because you are somebody who I've had a lot of beautiful conversations about privilege and white privilege and all the different ways that privilege shows up in life. And this is an example of sort of an intangible privilege that a lot of people that I've talked to about privilege will say, well, I didn't have privilege. I didn't have this. What are you talking about? I got this happened to me and that happened to me. And I'm like, you know, things like I grew up in a household with 2 parents who loved me, who treated me really well, who instilled a lot of confidence and love in me, and are still married, you know, decades and decades later, is honestly an extremely big privilege, right? In terms of an advantage in life, because if you look around, like you said, more than not, people have not had that experience. And so here we have a whole population on the planet where the majority of the people came from, sort of very early ages of having some level of a broken home, some level of abuse, some level of neglect, abandonment, dysfunction, addiction, all of that going on. And so those who, and I too grew up in a relatively, tight, super knit, very healthy, very positive, very loving nuclear family. And a lot of the experience that I had in the world and trauma and twists and turns came later, but it wasn't a result of my actual family of origin, which I think, just because I'm hearing you say it, it's making me reflect that I too have this immense privilege. And when we ultimately end up talking to people about healing, people come to us at such different levels of the kind of healing work that they need to do, because, some of us are not trying to heal the wound from childhood. Some of us are healing stuff later. Other people are like, the shit goes back to day one, or even before that with the ancestors or the trauma before that. So I just wanted to go down that tangent a little bit. And I'd love, as you keep telling your story, to have any of those reflections. I appreciate your viewpoint.
Well, and I feel a sense of responsibility around that, in a good way. And you need to show up and pay that forward, because you are, foundationally solid enough that you can hold space for others and help them in their process. And I feel very strongly about that. So, what I do is not just a job. I literally can't imagine not doing it. It's the thing that you do. So I feel very blessed and responsible.
And I think because we're on the topic, I just want to dig a little bit deeper with this conversation, because I think part of what you're saying is when you recognize that you have a privilege, which again, we can dissect in many ways, about socioeconomic and gender and sexual orientation and citizenship and race and, having had trauma, not had trauma, like there's so many different ways to slice this privilege piece. But as you start to recognize the ways that you in your own life do have privilege, the next thing to do, therefore, is what you're talking about, is to recognize it and realize, how can I use this privilege for greater good for humanity? How can I step up and be a support behind or in front or wherever I'm needed for those that haven't had this privilege, so that I can support them, so that they can take the next step on their journey, and that ultimately, so that we can all support each other, in this worldwide web of healing that we're creating on the planet, especially at this time in history. Like, I just feel like so much is alive right now, and you're talking about grief, and I know when we did some work around developing what now is a business for you, as a mentor, as a coach, as a sister friend, and all these different things, you were trying to figure out the identity behind it. And like, is this about death and dying? Is this about happiness? Is this about healing? And, and I know that piece around grief, you really felt like you could hold on to. And I think that now, in the context of the immense grief that we're experiencing on the planet, even in the collective consciousness, which for those who are like, what the hell are you talking about? Meaning that we're all individually suffering to one degree or the other and experiencing grief for many different ways, both from our ancestors as well as our real-time life here on the planet. And as a collective, as all of the people on the planet together, energetically, as I'm experiencing grief and trauma and activation, I'm starting to release that energy and actions and emotions onto the planet. Other people are as well. And we are actually extremely interconnected, while we've been trained to think that we're individuals by ourselves, going through this experience. And so that's why I'm just so excited about the grief work, because I feel like it's so relevant and so needed in this day. So how are you feeling in that moment of like, are you feeling like, whoa, look at this, like there's a deep well of need for this work?
Yeah, in a way, kind of a funny way. It's like, well, there's job security, and like, whoever thought, but like I say, this is not something that I would say I chose. I would say it chose me. I probably did when I made my original contract to show up here. And a friend of mine was just saying, we make those contracts on the other side of birth, because we probably wouldn't ever agree to it once we were in human form. I would never agree to this whole journey.
If we knew what we were signing up for, we would be like, no, I'll just stay here. Can I just hang out? This is looking pretty good over here. So you came from this great family. You had a lot of love and support. You had a strong foundation. Then at some point in time, you leave the home, and where is your journey taking you from that point?
Well, at that point, off to college kind of thing, and ended up meeting my husband at the end of college. And he moved right after we first started dating, and about 3 hours south of where we were in San Jose, and he moved to San Luis Obispo, and I followed. And, we lived together here for 26 years in a home, and then moved and had 2 kids. And through that journey, I really followed their education, my kids' education. And I would say that one of my loves and gifts is connection. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of call myself a connection junkie. So, I'm just connecting, networking with people, and just, building friendships and all that. And did some work in the charter schools, helping my children to nurture their education. And then, as my son said one time, somebody asked him, what does your mom do? And he says, well, my mom starts schools. So I didn't think about that, but I kind of, did support the different modalities that worked for them, which were all very different. And so through that, I started, building community, and growing up my kids, and life went on, and you thought it was going to go one way, and it didn't. It went another way. It was kind of like a 2x4 over the head when David was diagnosed, because he was such a strong, healthy person. So unexpected, totally unexpected. And he was actually somebody that people would think, we used to joke that we were mere mortals compared to him, because he was pretty superhuman.
Right.
So, that irony wasn't missed.
It's so interesting because, and I'm curious in terms of the grief work, and I'm sure you've thought about this, but, there's a lot of like, why me, and why is this happening to me? And, I was just talking with Joe about this on the drive last night, because similarly, he and I are both, very healthy, very full of energy, and seem to be, the epitome of health, right? And then there's people we were thinking about from our community where we're like, so-and-so is like really ill, and has terrible like life habits, and yet they seem to be like living forever, to like old age as a super, super sick person. But then, you'll hear about a tragic story, like someone like your husband, where you're like, and what the hell happened there? Like, why did that happen? Like, why is this person being spared when they're making all of these like really toxic decisions in their life? And you're looking at them like, are they still alive? Like, no offense, but you're just sort of like, how are they, the Energizer Bunny? And then you have people who are very conscious, very spiritually connected, very, aligned in their life, and all of that seem like these tragic things happen. I mean, and I'm sure you've spent a lot of time thinking about this. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, we don't know our path. We don't know what contracts we made when we came in. And I mean, David was kind of the ultimate teacher. He switched careers, midlife, and became a junior high and then high school teacher. And he loved teaching. And I just look at him as one of my greatest teachers through this journey. And, my mentor, Saban Fusome, said that sometimes some people who die give us a golden ticket. And I think David handed so many of us a golden ticket. It was a gigantic wake-up call. Hey, you guys, this doesn't last forever. This isn't a dress rehearsal. One day you too will take your last breath. And they're simply not here on the planet anymore. It just happens. And it still, to me, is so surreal at times, and he was a teacher who impacted hundreds and hundreds of students. They were impacted by his life and his death. And we got to walk that together in a very conscious way, because another blessing, a long-term illness can be super hard, and it can be such a gift, because you can walk that process from day one together. And that's what we did for 2.25 years. We grieved and walked it all together. So when he died, it wasn't a sudden surprise. You're never ready. But, truthfully, the way he died, it was kind of, oddly to say, but like the best way possible. Like, I have no regrets. There's nothing that I didn't say, or I go, wow, sure wish I would have done this.
Mm-hmm.
We kept showing up, and that required a lot of surrender over and over, to what is. Because when I found myself bumping up, and this is true of, like, I would say any change or any transition that we're in, or the state of the planet right now, the more we do this and fight what is and wish it was otherwise, the more I got exhausted and, taken out and had panic attacks and all that, and I wanted to show up. It's like, I don't want to disappear.
Mm-hmm.
If this is going to be my experience, I'm going to fully show up and, get everything, be in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned how to, over and over again, say, okay, he is dying now. I mean, that was clear at one point. And it's like, how am I going to show up? So I had to take care of myself. So self-care shifted significantly from a luxury, which is how I used to view it, to an absolute essential quality for me to be present. Mm-hmm. With the experience and with him.
Totally. So the self-care piece is huge. In addition to that, though, I'm curious about the spiritual principles, because part of what I'm hearing you say is, releasing the having to control the situation and being like reactive and resistant, and instead embracing the surrender and the not knowing and the gray area and, the outcome, letting those pieces go, which to me is one of the many timeless spiritual principles that, is I think with all spiritual stuff, it's like, it's so profound and life-changing. And yet you have to like go back to it again and again and again and again. And even when you think, oh, I made it or I mastered it. And then it's like, Spirit's like, nope, we got to do this one all over again. Okay. If you think that you're not going to keep getting tested, and it's like, I think the more that you get tested, the more you get familiar with it. So you build the muscles so that you can respond quicker, but it's not like all of a sudden you get to some level and, oh, you don't need to learn anything anymore or practice those things anymore. So can you speak to the role of spirituality or any nature-based things that you've been doing that were supporting you during that time, or even since then, that are big principles in your life?
Let me say, you just described beautifully what I'm calling a spiritual workout. It's like, okay, 10 push-ups, you got that? Great, do 10 more. Oh, 10 more, 10 more. It's like that right now. And you start going off course and it's like that, boom, nope, over here, nope, over here. Okay. And it's incessant. I mean, these are intense times.
Yes, and it's why people don't want to engage. It's also why people are not showing up, and they haven't been showing up, because it's a lot easier. They believe, this is what I think. And at least before, I used to be this person of feeling like if I like, it's just too much work, it's just too much freaking work. And once you open up the Pandora's box of spiritual guidance and healing, and looking at your shit, it just feels like, one thing after another thing after another thing. And I know a lot of the ladies in our broader community that have been experiencing this, where they're like, I've done like 2 years of work. Like, I've been in there. I do the mindfulness. I'm doing the self-care. I got my sisterhood. Like, what the fuck? Why all of a sudden is this memory popping up, or that trauma coming back to, come to roost, or whatever? Or I have this toxic person in my life. Like, I thought I had gotten these spiritual tools down, and that all of a sudden life was going to be super easy. So I think, like you're saying, a lot is alive right now. And to just reroute to where we were starting from is what are those spiritual, if there's 2 or 3 sort of guiding spiritual things or practices that you can point to for those listening in that might feel like, oh, maybe I can try that now. Maybe this can give me some more peace or give me some more healing.
Well, I every day I start and end my day with some quiet space. For me, it's out on my deck, bring a candle, I do a grounding meditation to connect to my body, to connect my body to the earth by putting roots down, and then connect up to the sky, almost like roots into the sky. I think of myself as a tree with the roots down and the branches out. And then I connect to what in the nature connection community, they often call the bigger body, to the earth. And there's something called the Thanksgiving address that I do some version of, connecting to the waters and the earth and the low growing plants and the animals and the trees and on out into the great mystery. And then remembering that I'm part of that. So through that practice, followed by connection to ancestors and gratitude, practice of gratitude every day, followed by prayer, which involves surrendering to the divine.
So some of the basic spiritual toolkit that we all know and we should all be doing, but it's so great to hear the reminder again to just repeat what you're saying, is taking just any time in our lives to get still, to get quiet, to disengage from our computers and our electronics, and just allow ourselves, whether it's at home, to lay flat and just let our mind go, or go outside, put our feet on, the grass if we have any, or in the cement if we're in the middle of the city, and just look up at the sky and wonder, just to me, anytime, that's why I'm very drawn to the whole nature connection world. Because to me, nature is the closest thing to God to me, other than the spirit that I feel within myself. But when I'm visualizing myself as a tree, or looking at a tree, or touching a tree, or looking at the birds, it's 100% clear to me of the magic of the universe, which reminds me that, hey, I might not understand what the heck is going on, but something is going on, something pretty wondrous is going on. And if I can embrace that not knowing, and sort of that mystery and magic and grace of that to me is 100% a fact, because I'm experiencing it, then I can also allow my mind to float further away to having faith that there is, that I'm a part of that web. And if I see magic and mystery and wonder in that, then there's magic and mystery and wonder in me. And if I believe that they're an extension of a divine creator of the planet, then that exists in me as well. And so these are some essential practices, the quieting your mind, getting in a quiet space, really allowing yourself to be present and mindful in a place of nature. And the other thing that you said is, calling in the ancestors, which I know if you're already in a spiritual community, or if you're in that world, that's a common thing we say. But I think for the everyday person who might be listening, might be a little bit like, what are you talking about? And so just to say on that front, really what we're just trying to say is the understanding that we are in this lifetime, but that there's many people who have come before us on this planet, who have done great work, who have experienced many things, who have fought a lot of battles on our behalf, and also sacrificed a lot for us to be in the place that we are now. And so part of that is that honoring process, even if you don't know who they are, which a lot of people feel a deep sadness of feeling like they don't know their roots, they don't know their ancestors, but just to even call them out is a recognition all the way down the lineage, to say, I know I'm not alone. I know I'm an extension of a greater history. And even if you don't feel 100% like spiritual or religious or connected to the concept of God, I think the concept of the ancestors who have become before you is something that you can hold on to, because that feels very based in truth and fact and science of they were my family, and it went many, many generations before. And then just the last thing that you said is this, focus on gratitude. And this comes up as a theme constantly. And I think it's just one of those timeless classic practices of just being in the moment and doing a check-in of all of the things that are working, that are good, even though there's a lot of crap that feels like it's not, but right now I can say Donna and I are together in 2 different places in the world. So gratitude for our computers and like this broadband connection or whatever it is. Gratitude for like the earbuds that are making me sound okay. Gratitude for her wood panel and my fabric on the wall. Gratitude for Donna's beautiful smile and that spirit that just radiates out of her that, she feels like you're going home. Which is so true. I don't know why. I swear to God, I know we have like danced for a long time in the ancestral realm, because I'm like, from the minute I met you, Donna, I just felt like I was home with you. Like I felt like you're like and I mean this in all the best ways of just like, you're that like old cozy blanket, that you just wrap around you and you feel like safe and you feel loved and you feel comforted. And so, woo! So it's no doubt that you found yourself into this amazing work. And so I would love for you to transition to talking about regenerative grief. And for those who, I think there's people right now that really need to understand the work that you do and learn more about it so that it can support them. So can you talk a little bit about that journey on the backside of, your husband's passing and then your own process of healing, which I know you're still in the midst of. And then how did that clarity come that this can now be a professional service that could be a support to other people?
Oh, wow. So through sharing my story with people, I did some of that on Facebook just to keep people connected, as to what's going on in our family. I was the one who was the communicator. I was hearing reflection back from people. It's like, wow, how do you know how to do that? Or, most people don't have this kind of experience, or whatever the thing was. I was hearing reflections back that it was a little different. I didn't really know that because I'd never experienced anything like this before, at least in this lifetime. So this is just how it is, I think, but nobody told me either how it was. And so through the process, oftentimes I would say, wow, I didn't get the memo on that one.
Right.
And so I feel a responsibility to pay that forward and to say, hey, you guys, did you know you can feel more vibrant in life after you've been close to death? That there is a way to live as if we really know we're going to die. Stephen Jenkinson says that, he says, most people, you go up and you ask them, hey, did you know you're going to die? They're like, of course I know I'm going to die. But the question is, do you live as if you know you're going to die? Like that could be at any time.
Can we just pause there for a second? Because like where I want to go with that is, okay, tell me right now 2 or 3 ways that I can live as if I know I'm going to die. And like you said, I know that concept. It's always in my mind. I actually have this like a little buzzing anxiety thing that I'm always trying to kick to the curb about, like, is today the day I'm going to die? So I feel like I'm probably a little bit more tuned in to like the fragility of life. But I think for those that are going to watch and listen to this, I think it'd be really helpful if you have some actual, tips on how can we be more present and live in the moment, especially in these times where I think most of us are feeling really overwhelmed. Like it just feels like and I mean, honestly, and I'm a freaking coach and master coach, and I'm teaching other people how to live better lives. And I'm like, what's going on? Because it feels like everything is amping up, all on the spectrum of the good and the bad. Like, there's a lot alive with like all of the trauma and racism and world shit going on. And then there's all this stuff of like, I've been working on myself. I've been doing this work. It's starting to expand. Things are coming. It's great, but it's a lot. And then, like from in my particular situation, being a mom, being a wife, I have home, I have a dog, I have desires to do investments, I have all this different stuff I want to do. And all of that is to say, I'm in a very, relatively very, very privileged position in my life compared to the collective on the planet. And so getting back to what I think is more important for all of us, to see it through the lens of those who have all of what I just said, but then a lot of other things going on, like maybe not being able to pay their bills, or, being a single parent, or not having access to good education for their children, or being afraid that every time their kid walks out the house, they're not going to come back, because they might get killed by the police or something like that. Like, there's a lot alive on the planet. And so I would love to, I know it's a sort of a big ask, but thinking about what you're saying about how can we, in the context of feeling so overwhelmed, so compacted, still be able to show up in our day-to-day and live our lives with that level of vibrancy and connection and presence, as if it was our last day, or knowing that we're going to die anytime. How can we do that?
Well, one of the things that comes up for me is the need for us to be real and share our stories and share what's going on for us. I heard you say, here you are with all of this experience, education, everything, privilege, all of it, and it is still really, really hard. So even fully resourced, we are challenged beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. Mm-hmm. So coming together, circling up. I'm thinking of women circling, but circle with your community, show up for each other. One of the things I learned through my experience with David is, what does it mean to show up? What does that look like, and what does it mean? And when you get really close to death like that, it becomes really clear what you do. It's like you stand and hold your husband's legs because he can't hold them up anymore, laying down, and that he's comfortable in that position. Mm-hmm. And you know what to do. So it's getting yourself still, and you get clear, and you simply do it. So it's being in aligned action. It's knowing what's in your heart and knowing what is important to you, and doing it. And it can be small acts. It can be, here's the thing this is the part I get so excited about. If all of us showed up as our biggest and brightest selves, did this work, show up, we don't know what's possible. People are feeding us information and data, but that is, for me, I look at it and go, that's if we keep doing what we're doing.
Right.
We have no idea.
There's no precedent.
No. So I'm living into that possibility, and that's why I want to help people show up so that they can be their full, vibrant self. What is your gift? Be in your gift. Check on your neighbor. Ask if somebody needs some help, and you ask for help, because this ask reminds us that we need each other. One of the things I'm looking at is, as everything is just imploding, exploding, everything else, maybe what it's about is us being put into, conditions being created. So we have to rely on each other.
Totally.
We have to.
I'm with you.
It builds a fabric. I noticed that I had to ask for help. So hard. It's still not easy for me to ask for help after, multiple years of knowing I can't do this by myself.
Yeah.
I'm still afraid somebody's going to say no. And it's, nobody's going to want to help you. And this is so untrue. This is so untrue. And it has not been my experience at all. And so we need to build this fabric together of showing up in the ways that we can for one another. Listen to our stories. Mm-hmm. It's a huge part of, the shame and the embarrassment and all that we feel. It cannot live in the light.
Right.
So circle up. Call a sister friend. Connect.
Amen, sister. And I think, I hear so often people saying like, well, it doesn't come across this way, but I think part of it is, well, that's good if you have a community, or that's good if you have positive people in your life. But I come from a fractured family, or I have not had a circle of support, or I don't really have a good friend that I can trust, or I've been damaged and burned, and especially for women, I've been having to do this on my own since I was 14 years old, and I'm still doing it on my own, and I'm raising kids on my own, and I'm trying to pay the bills on my own. And nobody has been showing up for me. And, part of what I think we're talking about is the capitalist, patriarchal, old paradigm, white supremacy paradigm of our American culture has been built on a model that in particular does not care about or support women, and as a whole is built on individualism and, you know, competition and separatism. And so we have been disconnected from those, what I believe, those baseline spiritual principles of oneness, of connection, of, you know, like universal love, which if we were all learning that from day one, and we were all learning that, you know, even though you live in your home, you know, the people on your block are a part of your ecosystem and your local community. So how can we learn to build a stronger relationship with our neighbor, or, you know, be involved in a leadership role in our local community? And since we haven't been taught that, and part of what we're talking about is creating a new paradigm, a new system, a new version of a society that we desire to create, which is part of what you and I are saying we're excited about, is the potential that exists as we're starting to realize, like, I can't do it alone anymore. You know, I am struggling, but I just can't do it alone anymore. And that's part of why I host women's nights out, and I do things at a really grassroots level. And I think what you're saying is, you know, really important in terms of let's support each other. We can't do it alone. Let's get in community. Let's gather. But at the same time, I think it's really important to say, not everybody's prepared to do that, and not everybody has the tools to do that. And so therefore those who do should start leading that, and pulling one sister and one child and one man at a time into the circle of support, and creating these safe spaces where people can start to heal and learn to trust again. And as they do, like I experience women coming to one event with me one evening where it is an extremely profound experience of safety. And through that, having immense levels of healing that then literally within the next week, they feel prepared to reach out to somebody else, or to take something that they learned, right? So I think that's what you're encouraging us.
Absolutely. And, you know, don't underestimate like the power of the potluck. Just invite some people over, you know? Yes. And there's another level of this intentionality that I hear you talking about, you know, which is a safe container. Mm-hmm. And so it's, you know, notice if there's somebody in your, you know, I'll call it your ecosystem, your area that you admire. Maybe it's an elder. Maybe it's somebody who's in a leadership role that you admire. You know, you can ask them to go have a cup of tea with you, you know, connect with them, let them know what you're doing, what you admire, because what you see in them, you have in yourself. So one of the things I did when David got sick is I created a circle of people. I call them anchors. Mm-hmm. And so I specifically asked people to help support me, a bodywork person, an elder, you know, people to be around me to, that I could reach out to and call. So you can start that with one another. You know, when a friend of mine came to talk about death and dying here, she was like my death coach, and she came and shared a story of a beautiful story of an elder who got sick, and over the course of time he died, and how it was community building. Another woman in the room said, you know, well, that's great, but my husband dropped dead of a heart attack in the driveway and my daughter found her. Mm-hmm. You know, so what do I do? And my friend said, you look around the room right now and you say, you choose people, you have a conversation, you say, I'm going to show up for you. Show up for you. You find your people, you know, we'll know from that resonance that we feel, but we need to know who we can count on, right? You create an inner ring. We're empowered to do that. It doesn't cost money. It takes courage. Mm-hmm. And it takes, you know, it's like, I don't fully know what I'm doing with all this stuff, but we got to do it anyway. Cause that's,
we do have to do it anyways. And those who can lead should lead. Absolutely. And I know not everybody feels comfortable with the concept of leading or being a leader, but all we're talking about, and it's what I teach all the time, is all you have to be is one step ahead. Yes. Like you don't have to, you know, Donna doesn't have it all figured out. I certainly don't have it all figured out. I'm trying to let it all hang out so that we can all be like normalizing the fact that, you know, we just don't have it all figured out, and we're sometimes really struggling and really in the weeds. And part of what you're saying is building that community of support, so that when you are struggling, when you are in the weeds, you have somebody, at least one other person that you can, you know, lift your hand out and say, hey, I could use some help. And by doing that, then you help them, then they feel like they're living in their purpose. So that helps elevate their fulfillment in their life. That also helps them build that trust with you. And then in the future, when they need some help, you can be there for them. And it starts with is one person. And so, like you said, you can have the potluck, you can have the, you know, block party, you can have the school party, all of that stuff. But really, it just starts with one person. And a lot of this is about the concepts of having the clear intention, which is, what do I want, and what is the vision, and what are the aligned action steps I'm going to take to get there? So, you know, I need some more support. What are the ways that I can call that in? What does that look like to me? Is that more girlfriends? Does that mean I need you know, an elder mama figure? Does that mean I need, you know, to barter with somebody where they can watch my kids and I could be a part of a childcare co-op? Does that mean I need to teach my kids how to start doing laundry? Like, what does that mean? And so just using those tools that you're outlining of like getting really clear on what you want, setting that clear intention, figuring out what the aligned action steps are, honestly, it can be extremely revolutionary. And these are the beginning stages of that awakening, that spiritual awakening, that consciousness raising, that mindfulness, that when you start to understand that if you live your life through a lens of intentionality, through a lens of being a divine being, through the lens of connection, that life doesn't necessarily, you don't stop having the problems, but in some ways it does get easier because you realize that it is somehow all interconnected, and that there are, you know, posts along the way that are there to help you. And as you start to become more awakened and conscious, you have your head up, even as you're walking through the muck. You know, you don't have your head down like this sucks and life is terrible and I'm so alone. You're walking through the muck, but you got your head up and you're trying to look for your people along the way. And you're trying to look for the little signs from spirit. Like, I know it's all jacked up, but you're not alone. I'm still here. And that could be a simple, like getting back to that gratitude that you talked about the smile on your child's face, or, you know, the hug, or that extra hour of sleep that you're getting, or, you know, just all of the little things as you start to take real gratitude for the simple pleasures and simple joys in life. I think that you just start to create this fabric of a really activated spiritual life, which is sort of as I always say, like the foundation of everything. And so I think that a lot of what we're talking about are some of these activations that happen in the earlier stages of your transformation, right? That at first can feel really overwhelming. But as you start to just adopt them as like tools that you stick in your toolkit, to build a more meaningful and fulfilling life, and to have the tools you need to show up, then as life starts intervening and sending you what it's going to send you, now you feel more adequately prepared, and you feel like, you know what, I can show up and do this. And so I just think that the work that you're creating is so beautiful, so important on the planet. And I've just been so excited to watch the unfolding.
Thank you so much for all your support. I mean, you know, yeah, I wouldn't be sitting here without, you know, strong leadership from women like you. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And so one of the things I want to talk about as we start to pull our conversation, at least part one of our conversation, because what I'm realizing now is I'm having these candid talks with my women in my world, that there's so many different directions we can go in and so many layers. And really what I'm hoping is that these conversations will be a reflection to those who are listening, to understand all of the dimensions of their own stories, of their own lives, and how valuable the storytelling is, and the witnessing of each other is, you know, how much we can learn from each other's realities. And so what I'm really wanting to do is just, part of what I want to hear about is, I know you have in particular recently gotten more active, like more inspired, more into inspired activism or sacred activism. I know in your local community, you've been a leader there for some time, but I think, you know, with the last year or two and all the changes that have been happening politically, in our world right now, I really noticed that you've, shown up more, you've upped your game, you've been more vocal, you've taken a stance for things, you've engaged in, really beautifully engaged in conversations around white privilege and, racial issues and, all the kind of stuff that people would often right now want to shy away from. You've really thrown your hat in the ring and said, like, I don't know everything. I'm not, I'm not an expert. I also probably are going to say a lot of stupid things that might offend people. I'm okay with that. I'm just going to show up because I can no longer not show up. Not that you had been not showing up before, but I think in a much bolder way, I'm seeing you come into that voice of yours. Can you share like what's going on with you?
Well, I mean, the word that keeps coming up is, being activated. And I would say lots of different things have activated me, including, my experience with David's death. But the last elections activated me as well. My son really got activated too. And so he was really inspiring to me to watch him navigate, what's going on. And so we started going to some of these, local progressive meetings together. And the different community building that I had experienced before, so these different networks that I was connected to, people were coming together now in a political forum from the education and the friends groups and all that, now looking at it from a political lens. And, I don't even really know the answer to the question, what is political and what isn't? I'm not sure, except to say that a lot seems to be, because it's one of the many ways that, this web of interconnection we have, one of the many ways that we do that. And I'm just seeing the local politics now as one of the structures that helps us or doesn't help us to be in community together. So I'm looking at it more from if you can look at it more from like a community building, a reculturing aspect. What roles does government play and what roles need to be played in it? Because I'm looking at it more like from organizational dynamics and group dynamics. Where do I fit into this now? So I've been asking that question. And it seems like some of it for me has really been being the presence of the feminine in some of these gatherings, on some boards and in some gatherings. Being willing to speak what's alive for you, what's in alignment, what doesn't look like it's in alignment, being able to use some of my communication skills in some of the meetings, with here's what I hear you say and here's what I'm hearing you say, type of things, that it has actually been really helpful and surprising to me. Once you've had a certain amount of life experience, it seems like things aren't as I just feel all the interconnections. It's not like this happens in this little slice of the pie of your life and this happens over here. Like subjects at school, they don't really exist. That's an artificial construct, and that everything's actually really linked together. So when a good friend of mine got elected mayor, it's like, sweet, here's an opportunity, so to be able to be in connection with her, see what needs support, pay attention to what's going on. So it's a really different way to participate in politics, but it's been very exciting to have an impact at a local level, at least to some degree. And I'm still figuring out what that looks like. But, supporting people in leadership by creating safe spaces for them too, that's an important thing for them to have. I remember as director of a nonprofit, where do you go with your stuff? Yeah. Where's your safe space? So we all need circles of support around us, no matter what our roles are, those leadership roles, because people in leadership roles, you are filling an archetypal role, and man, arrows get thrown at you, so what do we do? How do we work with all of that? And very interesting and intense questions.
Yeah. And I think that, like you're saying, you're finding your way and you're finding your voice and you're finding your role, and not all of the roles have to be the one out in the forefront. You know, I'm sort of one of those people that sort of takes the charge and is like, I don't know if I'm going to offend people. I don't know what people are going to think, but I got something to say. And I just get out there. And then there's people that are like behind me, like, go Celia, go, or like, we got your back. And then we're so glad that you're doing that or whatever. So I would say I tend to play that role, but I know also hearing from a lot of people, they're like, I'm not comfortable playing that role. Like, I don't, want to be the forward facing, outspoken activist or leader, but I want to be a part of it. And I want to, and I think more than anything, sort of this piece of looking at your privilege and realizing that there's a lot of things that you have going for you that a lot of other people don't have going for them as advantages. And how can you, I guess there's a part of me that just feels like, we got to all get involved. Like we can't not get involved. We can't not all try and solve these issues because it's all intersectional. Mm-hmm. It impacts us all. All of it should matter to us. The humanity of the planet should matter to us. The human rights of everybody on the planet, not just in our country, but across the globe, should matter. And the more that we can focus on, like you're saying, the ripple effect of starting locally, even in your home with community building, getting bigger, always holding that vision of the great big world that we're all a part of. And the great big, like in my circles, we say like the worldwide circle, like we're all a part of the bigger mission, the bigger purpose, the bigger why for the planet. And sometimes we can feel so alone, so isolated, so scared, so hurt that it's so much easier to just go through our day on autopilot, even though we're suffering, than to, pick our head out and take a minute to think about other people and to think about how we can show up in a more conscious way, how we can support our children, our sisters, our neighbors, and then to be asked to do even more. Right. And so I think part of what we're saying, just as I'm processing it out loud, is at the smallest level, or not even the smallest level, but at a very accessible level, there's a level of activism that you can do through the way that you show up in your life. Just even your own existence in your day-to-day life is an act of activism, is an act of putting forth a positive imprint on the planet, right?
Yeah, I've heard it called the 3-foot toss.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just tossed a ball 3 feet in front of you and you looked around, what's in your circumference? Is it the way you greet the kids in your carpool? Is it, the person at the checkout stand, that you see at the store and how you interact with them? I mean, I can have moments of connection with people that are just incredible that I feel the rest of my day.
Mm-hmm. Me
So,
too. I mean, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, when I first, and then very soon we're going to transition to the speed round, because what's happening when I'm having these amazing conversations, I'm just like, the intention was to just be like, we're hanging out talking on the phone. And since we're just hanging out talking on the phone, there is no time or space issues. We could talk all day. Right. So I'm like, okay, we're going to have to come back to that one and that one. But what you just said about making those authentic connections throughout your day and how magical and meaningful they can be. When I first started on my own spiritual awakening journey about 10 years ago, the thing that even to this day, I would say is one of my, it is a form of activism now that I really think about it through that light, but I recognized this 10 years ago of everywhere that I go, everybody who comes into my path, I can choose how I want to show up in relationship to them. And I can choose to pick up my phone and use that as a shield and get on my phone and not have to even make eye contact, or, like I was sitting on the plane this weekend, sandwiched in the middle between two guys who were both on their, version of their iPads or their video games or whatever. And I swear to God, I don't think any of them or me made any eye contact. And I was sitting there and I literally was thinking, how crazy is this? I've been on the plane with them for 5 hours. And if I ran into them in the airport, in the baggage claim line, I probably wouldn't even recognize them, or know who the hell they were. And I had the exact opposite experience on my first flight where I sat right next to a young lady. Maybe it's because I was on the aisle and I wasn't being sandwiched, but I was on the aisle. She was sitting next to me. I looked down in her backpack. She had a pair of cleats hanging from her backpack. That sparked my interest in having a conversation with her. So I said, oh, you have your cleats? She says, yes. I say, oh, my daughters play soccer. And already at this moment, knowing that in my belief, everything is spiritual, I'm like, okay, we're supposed to be having a conversation. So we start spiraling into what ends up being a full 5 hour, the full flight conversation, where very quickly I'm telling her about how trauma is so alive in the consciousness. I mean, she's 19 or 20 years old, but I'm of course having this conversation about, while some of my ladies are remembering their rape stories or their assault stories and this whole Me Too movement, and is it intersectional and women of color, because she was African-American woman. And then she goes, she says, oh, that happened to me too in college, and I had to drop out of school. And so then we start that within 5 minutes, she's already shared with me one of probably the most personal things anybody could ever share about the fact that she herself had been raped. And here we now have this trust, this bond, this connection, this heart to heart. And we go on for 5 hours bonding and, doing selfies together and exchanging information and talking about, can we now go into schools and together and partner her story, my coaching and mentorship? Could we do something that would be an act of service in the community? So all of that is to say that I learned a long time ago that how you show up in any given moment makes everything. The fact that I'm sitting between these two guys sandwiched, and even in that context that I wasn't able to get myself to figure out how to engage with them in any way, right? I honestly did not make any connection with them, which is so bizarre. But in this other situation, I was able to just immediately drop into being present, connect. The fact that I wanted to work during that flight didn't matter to me. I understood very clearly that the conversation I was having with her was way more important than anything else that I was going to experience. These are just long ways to exemplify the point that you're making about really showing up and being present and making those authentic connections as people come into your path.
Well, I'm hearing you talk about contrast as a teacher here. Mm-hmm. You saw the two, big differences there, and that's a powerful teacher, and we can tap into what it means to be fully human together like that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to take. It's a story that it takes me a long time to get to know someone. Yes, I mean on a broad base, but I don't know. You can just go deep with people really quickly. I had a Lyft driver experience like that when I went to see my friend in Denver, and it was incredible. And
everybody has these Lyft stories. I gotta say that's a phenomenon in its own. I think maybe in my next series, I've already been thinking about taking the conversation to the streets, and now I'm thinking maybe I need to take it into the Lyft drivers, because everybody I know and every Lyft driver I get to, this is a perfect example. Okay, when you get into a Lyft or an Uber, do you get in and either get on your phone or read a book and get silent and just be like a passenger the whole time? Or do you get in and say, hey, how's it going? How's your day? Oh, I'm tired too, blah, 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 and see where the conversation takes you. That's a lifetime experiment that you could do, because in my experience, literally every time I've gone that extra mile to open myself up, I have not been disappointed. And I swear to God, at least 90% of the time, I feel like either I or they are literally being a channel from spirit. Like the thing that they're saying to me, or that I'm just flowing out of my mouth, is like the thing that they needed to hear, or the blessing that I needed to hear. They're crying, I'm crying, we're hugging, we're exchanging information. Yeah. It's so profound.
Yeah. Well, when we pay attention, there's a matrix there, and we're just riding that. And sometimes it takes the same route as a Lyft,
I love
magical. It's magical when we let ourselves be guided in those ways,
It is. Yeah. Let ourselves be guided. Right. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
So as we culminate our hangout today, I just want to go through this speed round so that we can get some nitty gritty inside juicy information from you. So I'm going to just throw out some little quick questions here, and whatever pops into your mind, there's no right or wrong. Just tell us what comes up for you. So religion or spirituality?
Spirituality.
In person or online?
In person.
Speaking or writing?
Speaking.
Coffee, chocolate, or wine?
Yes.
All, please.
All three.
And then how about this one? Sleep or sex?
Sex.
Okay. Amen.
Yeah.
So we are calling it in. We're calling it in. That might be your guiding word for the year.
It might be. It might be. That's great.
So what would you choose if you had a guiding word for your year?
This year, it's been, the divine. It's been divine guidance. It's been, surrendering to that, that force that moves through all of us. It's been quite a journey, and so cool to see how that actually works, like to play with it and experiment with it over and over again.
Mind-blowing. Yeah. I'm
yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
I mean, and just as a sidebar, it's like once you start, playing and exploring the world of spirituality, it's like it just gets better and better. It also gets more, you get more lessons and more awareness and more junk falling out the trunk. But it's like you get these tools that get deeper, get better, get richer, get so. I mean, I'm like obsessed. It's my field of joy.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the human experience, doing the work while we're here, because there'll be a time when we're not here, and we'll rest then. So
right, that's a good way of looking at it. So the key to healing is,
I think it's allowing. Where our original instructions are to heal. We need to kind of get out of the way, but that's an active allowing. It's not totally passive. So yeah,
we can do a whole talk on that one. You're just dropping the knowledge. I love it. What the world needs most now is
empathy.
And let's say it's the day you're passing over and we're all in celebration talking about your life. What is it that you want us to say about you?
She sure showed up for her great-great-grandchildren.
Oh, yes, she did. I love it. What a beautiful vision. And so it is. As we pull this thread through and of this beautiful quilt that we've made today, is there anything else that you'd like to say that's sitting on your heart that you feel like, you want to make sure it gets out there?
Gratitude for this life. I mean, look what I got to do today, Sometimes I really literally have to pinch myself and go, do I really get to do this? I do. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
I love you so much, sister. Thank you for showing up, being real, being raw, letting it all hang out. And I know that I have been forever changed, and I'm sure everybody who's listening in has been activated or inspired or transformed in one way or the other from this conversation. So much love.
Oh, back at you. Yeah.
Yay. See you soon, honey.
Okay, bye.